All right, so today we're going to be talking about types of angles and kind of some special relationships within those. So the very first one that we're going to look at is what's going to be called vertical angles. Vertical angles are two angles that are across from each other on intersecting lines. And the thing to notice is that they are always congruent. So for example, this spot, this angle, is congruent to this angle over here. So we can say that this is equal to this one. So they're going to have the same angle measures. So for example, if that was 50 degrees, then the one across from it would also be 50 degrees. And the same is true for these sets of angles. All right, and so in this case, the green angles are also going to be congruent to one another. Okay, so those are vertical angles. All right, moving on to adjacent angles. All right, working our way counterclockwise. All right, so the first thing we're going to look at is adjacent angles. And so that's two angles that are just next to each other and they share a common side. So here would be our first angle, all right there. And then our second angle is this obtuse angle greater than 90 degrees, and it's there. So angles 1 and 2 are adjacent. That just means that they are next to one another. Okay. Moving on down to complementary angles. Okay, complementary angles, any two angles whose sum is 90 degrees. So we know that both of these angles are going to add to equal 90 degrees. And the way that we show 90 degrees is by having a little box in our angle. That box right there means 90 degrees. All right, so for example, in these angles, their sum is going to equal 90. So if this first angle is, say, 12 degrees, then the other angle would have to add to give you 90. So 90 take away 12, all right, and that would give me, 78 degrees. So my second angle here would have to be 78 degrees. So since 12 plus 78 is equal to 90, we can say that these are complementary angles. Okay, moving on to supplementary angles. Supplementary are any two angles whose sum is equal to 180 degrees. All right, so along a straight line, okay, we know that a straight line is going to add up to equal 180 degrees because it's half of a circle. A circle is 360 degrees all the way around. So a flat line straight all the way through is going to be equal to 180 degrees from here to here. It's half of a circle. All right, and so this side, angle 1, this side, angle 2. All right, we know that angle 1 plus angle 2 is equal to 180 degrees. All right, so whatever numbers that you could plug in there could be like, could be 120 and 60. All right, 120 plus 60, that would give you 180 degrees total. All right, so the way that I remember supplementary and complementary, complementary starts with a C, all right, CO, and we have the corner box for complementary, which means 90. And then for supplementary, S for straight line, so you know that you're working off of a straight line, which is going to be 180 degrees total. Okay, moving on to linear pair. Linear pair are two angles that are adjacent and supplementary, so they form a straight line. So in a linear pair, both these angles, they just lie on a straight line. So this angle and this angle over here are also going to be supplementary. They're also adjacent to each other because they're just next to each other. Okay, now let's look at identifying some of these angle types. Okay, so in our first example, all right, this angle type is going to be directly across from one another. All right, and I would encourage you to try these on your own. Press pause in this video, take a few minutes, and try to do this by yourself. We'll come back and we will have all the answers. Okay, so I hope you've taken some time to try these. I'm going to go through number one. Number one is across from each other, so these are just vertical angles. Okay, number two. All right. Well, I noticed that there's a corner box right here, which means that there has to be a corner box on this side. All right, that automatically tells me that these are complementary. Okay, is there anything else? Are these adjacent to each other, or 1 and 2 right next to each other? And yes, they are. So adjacent angles are also going to work. Are these angles vertical? No, they're not. Are they supplementary? Well, if they're complementary, they can't also be supplementary. And then if they're not supplementary, they can't be a linear pair. So we just have adjacent and complementary in this example. Okay, for number 3. So what do I notice about angles 1 and angle 2? Well, I notice they are along a straight line. They're right next to each other. So I know that they're adjacent. Straight line means linear pair, and straight line means supplementary. All right, and these other two, vertical and complementary, would not apply. Vertical, they're not across from each other. This would be the vertical side over here, vertical with 2. This side would be vertical with 1. All right, so now let's look on at number 4. Okay, I'm looking at angles 1 and angles 2. One thing I would want to look for is do they have a measurement there? Is that 90 degrees? Not necessarily. You know, it may be like 91 degrees, 92 degrees. We're not really sure. So that automatically knocks out the complementary. They're not on a straight line, so the supplementary and linear pair are also out. They're not across from each other, so vertical is out. All right, so the only thing that's left for these is going to be that they're adjacent to one another. Okay, let's look at number 5. All right, what do I notice about angle 1 and angle 2? Well, angle 1 is this angle here, and angle 2 is this angle here. All right, and if we notice this, those two lines that they're made up on, that's a perfect example for something that is vertical. So here and here, those are vertical to one another. All right. Other than that, that's really the only things that we have. So I can mark out all these other things. The only relationship that they have is that they are vertical to one another. Okay. And lastly, number 6, I'll also notice that these are vertical right off the bat. They're not adjacent. And they are not complementary. They're not a linear pair. Okay, but are they supplementary? Does their sum add to equal 180 degrees? Well, if you see that you have a box here, that means that 2 also has a box, 1 also has a box. So both of these are 90. All right, and is 90 plus 90 equal to 180 degrees? All right, I think that we could verify that it is. So these are supplementary angles. All right, so I hope you did well with that in identifying those types of angles. Okay, let's move on to how would these work in types of problems that we're looking at. So we're using these angle relationships to find some actual measures in these problems. All right, so I'm going to just kind of go through a couple of them, then I'm going to let you guys get started and go from there. Okay, so number 1, what do I notice about this angle and this angle? Well, the first thing I know is that they're vertical. So if I just want to know what x is, I know vertical angles from my sheet here. Vertical angles are congruent to each other. So x has to be equal to 112 degrees. Okay, looking at number 2, I notice I have a corner box here. So I know that these are complementary. All right, and I know that complementary angles add to be equal to 90. So angle 1 and angle 2 have to add to give me 90 degrees. All right, well, angle 1 is x, angle 2 is 68, and that's got to equal 90. So when I subtract 68 from both sides, all right, I get that x is equal to 22. Okay. All right, here on number 3, okay, you notice that these are on a straight line. So this one is supplementary. Okay? Let's look at number 4. All right? So I'm going to start with the number that I have. Okay? The number that I'm given is 43. And I know that across from 43, I have vertical angles. So I know that y has got to be 43 degrees. Okay? Now, moving on, I'm just going to redraw this over here to the side. If I have 43 right here and x degrees here, okay, well, I noticed that these are on a straight line, which means that they have to be supplementary to each other. So angle 1 plus angle 2 have got to be equal to 180 degrees. All right, so we can find this one pretty easily. Angle 1 is x, angle 2 is 43, and that equals 180. All right, so we'll subtract 43 from both sides. Okay, and we get that x is equal to 137 degrees. Okay, since x is 137 degrees, it's also vertical with z, and so z is equal to 137 degrees because they're vertical with one another. Okay, so I've gotten you guys started on this. Let's go ahead and let's try to work on some of these. Work with your group, work with a partner, and let's continue to work on 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And I'm going to be walking around and helping you guys out as you go with this.